Hello, everybody. Thanks for showing up to the Tuesday night Torah study class, but we're not going to be doing it like we normally do, because I'm sitting in for Jerry, who is in, well, let's just say he's not available right now. He should be back either next week or the week after. I'm not sure. So, and then at that point, we will start over with the Torah cycle. What I've been doing is doing a series on two house. But before we start, let's enter into a prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for this evening. What a great evening. I'm looking out the window right now. What a wonderful sunset. I'm grateful for living in this country where you can get together and study your word without any hassle. I appreciate that. So we gather here together to do an in-depth study of your word and try to draw closer to you to understand what it is you would have us do. So I pray for these things, Heavenly Father, in the power, name, and authority of your Son, Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen. Let's see. So we kind of finished up the two-house thing. It was requested that we maybe look into covenants. So I'm titling this teaching, Covenants and Contracts. But I wanted to review some of the discussion we had last week. I had in my teaching I had a series of verse lists verses that you could go check. By the way, you can go check all this out at myhebrewbible.com teaching/2house. And if you just go to the home page like this, scroll down, you see the teaching button. And for the 2-house one it's the first button here. And then later on we'll do this one down here, covenants and contracts. So I'm just organized them in a place that way you can look at them online. I'm updating these. I updated them every week that we did a class. It's got links down here to the verses, like I said, that we went over, the articles that I referenced, or kind of referenced. Some of them I did, some of them I didn't. And I even have links to the videos, the YouTube videos. So if you want to go back, check them out. But we had the last few verses we discussed. One of them was Ephesians 2:12-19. And we spent a lot of time on that because Paul Hebron, who's not here right now, was challenging me on why that would be a good verse to try to convince a Gentile of two-house teaching. This was good because he had good points, and iron sharpens iron. Before I go forward with my response, I wanted to comment on a few verses that we read that ended up being interconnected, in my opinion. These verses were 2 Timothy 2:15, where it talks about study to show thyself approved. And then a verse that we didn't list, wasn't on my list for the 2-house, but it's 2 Peter 3:16-17, where Peter is speaking about Paul, and it says, are some things of Paul's epistles that are hard to understand. And then we finally went to this great one in 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 9-10, that talks about the chosen generation, royal priesthood, and a holy nation. The discussion that Paul and I had, we were dialoguing back and forth. You know, like I said, he was asking, why would I try to explain? Let's read that real quick, just so we have a context. If I go to my favorite verses, and I click down to Ephesians 2:12-19. Anybody feel like rereading that over? That at that Hold on. Let's grab the mic there, Joe. That's all right. It's right behind you. Right behind you, Joe. Is it turned on?
Okay. That at that time ye were without Christ, being alien from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers from the covenant of promise, having no hope, and were without God in the world. But now in Christ Jesus, ye who were sometimes were afar off, are made nigh by the blood of Christ. For he is our peace, who has made both one, and has broken down the middle wall of partition between us, having abolished in his place the enmity of the law of commandments containing in ordinance, for to make in himself twain one new man, so making peace, and that he might reconcile both unto God in one body by the cross, having slain the enmity thereby, and came and preach peace to which were afar off, and to them that were nigh. For through him we both have access by one Spirit unto the Father. Now therefore ye are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and the household of God.
Thank you, Joe. So, I mean, that verse is just loaded with stuff. And stuff that I like. It talks about, laws. It talks about strangers, covenants of promise. That's a covenant is a contract. It talks about the commonwealth of Israel. It talks about those that were afar off, that were not in the same, cannot make the same claim of citizenry to the place where God placed his name. He talks about the two becoming one. The point was, as Paul pointed out, if you told this to your typical Christian who's got their view of how things ought to be, because that's how they've been taught, not by just reading the scriptures in a straightforward way, they would come up with a conclusion that's different than you would if you did it in a more methodical way, I woto say. And my response to Paul was, well, I realize that, but I'm not going to start here in this verse as a place to make the case of two houses. So, but having said that, if we read the remaining verses, like 2 Timothy 2:15. It says, "Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth." Take that, and then you also read Peter, and verse was that? 2 Peter 3:16 to 17. Let me look that up real quick. 2 Pete 3. (3:16). As also in his epistles, speaking in them of these things, in which some things are hard to understand, which they that are unlearned and unstable wrest, as they do also other scriptures, unto their own destruction. Peter's giving you a big warning about Paul. He's not arguing against Paul. He's just saying this is heavy stuff that Paul's speaking of, right? So if you go back to Timothy, now what is the book of Timothy about? Anybody know? What's the background of why do we call Timothy Timothy? Paul, was he Paul's son? I think he was his student. Yeah, I was his student, I think. I don't know if he had any children. So this letter is to Paul, or this is Paul's epistle to Timothy. And what does he say here? Timothy, study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. I would interpret that to mean I'm teaching some pretty heavy stuff here. Law, I think, was his main subject matter. And you need to step up your game. You need to study this. You need to own this stuff. So if you're challenged, you're not ashamed, right? Rightly dividing, if you're a workman of God, well, this kind of gets back to the two house. If a workman, is that like a priest? Aren't they like a workman? And if are you or are you not part of this royal priesthood? And where would you go to study about the priesthood? You got to go back to the beginning. You got to go back to the Torah. How do you rightly divide the word of God? Well, this is my take on it, but if the essence of what this relationship with Yahweh is a covenant, and that's a special form of contract, then you need to understand, you need to divide that word based on that premise. That's my take on it. So it isn't just I studied the word. You have to study it with proper hermeneutics, for lack of a better word. The proper teaching of identifying the weightier matters. What's that? Yeah, eisegesis. You want to use exegesis and avoid eisegesis. Mark, do you have a question? You going to run the mic? Okay. Let me stop here and think about this for a second. So, to get to why this whole conversation started with Ephesians, you don't want to start with Ephesians. You don't want to start with Paul's letters. You need to start with the Torah. You need to understand what happened in the prophets. What are the prophets warning about? What is the Torah? I'm arguing it's a covenant, which is the subject we're going to talk about today. So those are the things you need to start with. You don't need to start with, well, the church fathers say this and the church fathers say that. So I agreed with that, and I think those verses we read kind of pulled that together and made that case. Could use more work on it, but
just real quick, I'm going to bring a few up to speed, just so everybody knows. So the teaching is about two house, one covenant, one law. Right. We're probably one of the very few communities that believe in two house, one law. Most Hebrew roots communities are about one house and two law. And what that really means is there's a lot of people that believe that there's only one law for the Jewish people, no one else can partake of it. And so we believe that there's not two different sets of laws or instructions for God's people, it's one. Most people don't agree with that. And so that's where the two different laws, we believe one law, most people believe in two laws. We believe in two house, meaning the whole house of Israel was divided into two kingdoms, the northern kingdom and southern kingdom. And when that happened, it created a two house scenario. Most people believe there's still just one house. And that's scripturally, Jesus, Yeshua, when he came, he said, I came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Israel at that time is called the northern kingdom. Judah is called the southern kingdom. Just to kind of catch up to speed. While we were in Israel, it was noted that there's really not many globally that teach this. And we've had many, many people come into our community saying, we're so glad that you do. It needs to be promoted. It needs to be talked about. So, yeah. Margaret.
I think what happens is with the two house concept, I'll call it that, concept, two house concept, is that we're in Christianity. We've been in pretty much believing lies, fables, and myths. Taught and believing and doing lies, fables, and myths. Instead of going to Torah, which is first 5 books, and then of course you got the history and everything that gives you all the background of how that played through with Israel. And being raised as Christians, when you start accepting Torah, I think it's very hard for some people to say, well, you know, you don't really quite identify yourself as Israel because you've been out here. You're just a Christian. Yeah. And so I came a different route. I came through the sacred name route to where the two house teaching is there. The sacred name is a very weighty concept and teaching. But the main thing is the Torah. Yep. It stands forever. Yes. And I think that's kind of a hard thing for Christians who've been taught that the law was done away with, you know, believing in those lies, fables, and myths that they were taught. And then when you start learning about the truth and you start reading Torah, that it's real, it's kind of hard because it kind of leaves you like you're out there. You're not part of Israel.
Where am I?
Yeah.
You have to undo, what'd you call them, lies, fables, and myths? Yeah. Before you can get...
What she's referring to brings us to this identity thing. Right. And that's where I believe we're coming to next as we've come into Torah now. We're not just out there by ourselves. We have an identity. And God is awakening people globally to their identity, who they are, and our brother Judah to who we are, this group of people that are wearing tzitzit and keeping Shabbat, but they don't say they have proof of Jewish roots, you know. So it's an interesting thing that they're trying to grasp. And we met a gentleman in Israel, Harry Rosenberg, who talked about groups he's discovering globally in Africa, in Afghanistan, that can trace it all the way back 2,000 years. So very interesting stuff.
Just one more point that reminded me, we talked about last week. Two house isn't, the goal isn't to convince you really of two house per se. That's kind of an ends to a mean, it's a means to an end. Two house is just a reality. It's a biblical historical reality. The goal is the one covenant part. That's really where you want to end up. You know, do you want to be in, is it important to you to be in covenant with Yahweh? That's the ultimate goal. And the reason you weren't in covenant is because these houses split and one of them got the bill of divorce, out of covenant. And the Messiah fixed that problem. So, again, I'm not trying to, like we said, it's not to try to convince you that, you know, it's a salvific issue that you understand two house. It's absolutely, no, the important is, can you be assured that you're in covenant? That to me, that's the ultimate goal. And when they talk about one house, two covenants, and the other covenant is this vague, you know, Noahide law form, well, where is that? Where does that exist? That's not, it's the verses that are used to defend that are pretty lame.
Doesn't exist. So yeah, the whole idea of this covenant in this week, this coming Shabbat's Torah portion, in the Brit part of it, it has the verse that says, Yeshua is the end of the law. And we're going to get into that pretty heavy because as we've been brought up in our faith, we've always thought that when Jesus came, he put an end to the law. But that's, when you look at the Greek, that's not what that scripture says. It literally says that Yeshua is the goal of the law, the Torah. So, and what is the goal? God's goal from the prophets all along is to regather, reconstitute the whole house of Israel and bring them to the land under one covenant. That's the goal.
In peace. They would be at peace. They would be peace with themselves, and they'd be at peace with God.
But salvation had to come to some of us to get to that goal.
Right.
And that's part of the purpose. One law, one people, one nation.
Right. What was I going to say? I was going to say something. Forgot. Well, let's go over, that was requested, since we talked about the goal was the Torah, and I'm claiming the essence of the Torah is that it's a covenant, or to put it another way, a sacred contract, then you need to study that. You need to realize that. And I was going to do an example if we have time. Well, I'm sure we will. In what we talked about yesterday, or Mark brought it up in Exodus 12 about the blood on the doorpost. And so I think the secret to the thing that's given me clarity to understanding Scripture is to see if you can identify where the contracts are. Because if you have a contract with the creator of the universe, is there anything more powerful than that? I mean, we identify as a bond servant. Well, the flip side of that is there must be a bond master. A bond servant doesn't bond to nothing, he bonds to a master. So God can't do whatever he wants to if it violates his covenant, his contract. Joe.
John, we didn't make the contract with Yeshua. He made the contract with us through Abraham.
Right, but Abraham said he would do. He followed it. He had to agree to it. You understand? Technically, it was a trust, but he had to agree to it. He had to say, he had to be tested, and then he had to take his son up and have his faith tested, right? So, there's a tradition that says God went to a whole bunch of other nations before he went to Israel, and they all said, "Nah, I don't want to do that." It isn't just that he offers you a covenant, you have to take it. It's the 10 Commandments, they're technically 10 words, right? They're just words on a piece of paper. Until Israel said, "Yeah, I'm doing that," then they become commandments, then become alive. They become alive.
So you mentioned there's having a what was the word you used with the creator of the universe? A
sacred contract? Or
a contract. You could use the word covenant.
Yes.
So what was it? Abraham would agree with you because Abraham swore by that promise, that covenant that he had. He had a covenant of circumcision. And he made Eleazar and everyone else swear by that when they put their hand under his thigh. So he thought that was the greatest thing he possessed, was that covenant, that contract that he had with the creator of all things. Because he believed in it, and it was of great value to him.
Right. He left the Ur of Chaldees. He didn't just say, "Oh, that sounds like a great idea. I'll enter into covenant with you, but I'm going to stay here. I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm just going to pretend." Well, he left a lot of stuff. So you have to perform on that end of the contract, that end of that covenant to work. So with that said, let me go back here. you have a question, Paula?
Well, I just have a comment. We spent about 5 days in Judea and Samaria, visiting different people that reside there, who built their homes there. It's the area that many would consider the West Bank. And we were blessed to hear their story of exactly what you're talking about, which is this land was given to us, and we were told to go in and, what was it, Mark? To possess it?
Take it?
Or to take it, basically. I've given this to you, now take it.
It's your inheritance.
Yes. And so even though their families are massacred, their homes are bulldozed, they continue to stand and watch and continue to rebuild, continue to plant, because they know that they have an agreement with the Almighty, that He gave this to them, and they are to take it. They are not to give it to anyone else, but they are to possess it. So
Right.
Very interesting. And it's a blessing. There's not a lot of them, but those that stand are very firm on what you're saying tonight.
Yeah, they're a powerful witness. So, in my book that I've got, the Marcin's Rules, I write down all the things that kind of a high level thing that's important to me. It's at the bottom of this list down here if you want to look at it. Anyway, I define this covenant as the weightiest thing. I don't know what else is weightier than this. Yeah, jump in anytime.
I probably forgot the most important part of that. They're standing there holding the ground because they know the promises that their exiled brothers are coming home. And they're waiting for the return of their brothers. They know the fulfillment of Scripture will take place, and they're standing there waiting for their exiled brothers to come home and inhabit the land that was given to them.
Do they have any opinion about, I'm just curious, about the prodigal son? Do they have some insights onto that, or they don't really?
Some do.
Okay. Well, anyway, let me just kind of go through this list, and then we'll get into Exodus. I want to give an example. The other presumption I have is, or the other premise that I'm starting with is that covenants are a special form of contract, but a contract nonetheless. What I mean by that is, whatever covenants are, they have to have all the elements that make up a contract. Contracts are understandable. You can grasp your hand around that. I'd like to give the example of a fifth grader who wants to buy a Happy Meal at McDonald's. He knows he can't just go up there and say, I want a Happy Meal. He's got to give him something, right? He's got to have an exchange. There's a contract. He has expectations that when he gives him the $5 or whatever it is, he's going to get a cheeseburger, and I don't know what else comes with it, and it's going to be good, and it's going to be warm, and he's going to get it in a certain amount of time. He has certain expectations. McDonald's has an expectation that they'll give him the $5. So it's not a hard concept. You know, if we do the covenant, it says you will be blessed. You follow these rules, you follow these instruction manual of life, you're going to be blessed. So, and if you don't like the word just contract, call it a sacred contract. That kind of gives it a nice feel, a nice sense to it. The battery die?
Another example of that would be in the transition. God made a promise. One day, when the people come back,
Right, when the people come back.
blossom, bloom, come to life.
Right.
Land had expectations. Land probably cried out, when are they going to return? When is your wrath? When is your punishment on them going to end? So they come back so that we can do what we're going to do.
We have the lamb.
And now we're witnessing and seeing that Paul and I come back with a good report of the land is amazing.
And the land is blossoming.
It is amazing.
The rocks cry out kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, the rocks have been, the hills have got hewn That's pretty awesome.
Mark was just talking about it in Israel when he was, what, you want to just repeat it real quick so we can get it on the mic? Or
I was just saying that the land cried out, when are you going to put the people in the land? Well, the promise and covenant was that the people would return. And when they did, the land would come to life, and it has. We saw it, beautiful. The hills, the terraces carved into the rock is waiting. I mean, it's just waiting for us to come home.
right.
Yeah.
So by studying this, I claim you have great clarity as to what the Scriptures is about. You always want to look for these contracts. Elements of a contract, what are they? Let's go with that real quick. Page 5. Offer, acceptance, consideration, terms and conditions, meetings of the mind. Offer. What is the thing that Yahweh gave Israel? What is it? Is it a ketubah? Isn't that another important word to understand? Here's the offer, right? Acceptance. I will do what you offer. Consideration. I will bless you. I will be your welfare provider, God says. That's what he's ponying up. And you will be my people. That's the quid pro quo, an exchange of something. The terms and conditions, T's and the C's. That's the commandments, the statutes, the ordinances. Those are commandments that Israel has to fulfill. I would also argue there's terms and conditions that Yahweh has to fulfill. Like you just mentioned one. You said you're going to bring them back. Prophets talk about it. Hosea talks about that. A lot of places talk about that. Messiah, he's going to repair the breach. The breach of what? The breach of contract. Meeting of the minds. These probably don't necessarily mean right in the order, but meeting of the minds is I have to agree to it. There has to be, I can't be forced into this agreement. So I just wanted to go over that real quick. If you understand that, I think you'll have a lot of, if you look for those things in Scripture, you will find a lot of important things. The other thing I would mention, it creates offices. Like the priest is an office. The Elohim of Israel is an office. Yahweh fills that office. He's the king of Israel. It was until we decided in 1 Samuel chapter 8, said we didn't want a king like, we don't want you as our king anymore. We want to vacate you from the office. We want a king like the nations. I don't think that was a very smart move. So that's an element too. And there can be more complicated things like a trust, the thing that's described in Genesis 15, the covenant of the pieces, I would argue is more like a trust. But it still has contract, it still meets those things. Abraham and his seed were more like the beneficiary of that trust. I will bring them out of Egypt. He promised them that. And he would bless them. So we can go on. That's a pretty heavy chapter to go into, but we won't go there now. There's another thing. If you have contracts, you can identify your authority and exercise your authority. You don't have an agreement between someone, and you're forcing some issue on them, and that person isn't in agreement with you, then you have no authority. You're operating without the law. The contracts create the law. It's formed when the contracts are signed. So let's look at Exodus 12. We talked about this. You talked about that on Shabbat, right? The blood on the doorpost. Where is Exodus 12? Oh, it's back here. I'm sorry, Exodus 12. Exodus 12. I was thinking about this when you were talking about this, Mark, about the Passover. We're in the middle of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which happens right after the Passover. One of the points of the Passover is to remember the events that happened. So, go ahead.
We're required to remember every day by eating the matzah.
Right.
So one of the things is each day of unleavened bread, we're supposed to eat some. Well, eating that is a zikaron, memorial, a reminder of what's taking place, where we're at.
Is that true? I'm not denying that, but that you're supposed to. Well, yeah, I guess you're right. It's the Feast of Unleavened Bread.
You're supposed to eat it every day.
Right.
Every day.
I know you're not supposed to eat unleavened bread, but does that necessarily mean?
Yeah, it says you're supposed to eat it every day.
Okay. So you learn something all the time. I mean, if I just ate fruits and nuts and whatever.
No, you can eat all that other stuff, but you've got to eat unleavened. You're supposed to eat unleavened bread every day. You got to have
a wafer, a cracker of unleavened bread. Yeah. Corn tortilla will work. All right, I'm going to be in Exodus 12. Find a good place to start. So as I go through and read this, I want you to think about the things of the contract that I talked about, the elements of a contract, right? Identify parties, identify terms and conditions.
Go down to verse 15. Read verse 15.
7 days shall you eat unleavened bread. Even the first day you shall put away leaven out of your houses.
How many days are you supposed to eat it?
I interpret that, and my bad. I interpret it as 7 days you shall not eat leavened bread, but that's more specific. See, I didn't have all the terms and conditions down there. Anyway, I'm just going to read through this real quick. I want you to think about that. Think about contracts. Is there a contract here? I also want to think about one of the way there's this level of understanding pardes, and there should be things that remind you, like the door, right? It's a powerful symbol of what's on the door right here at Living Messiah. The Ten Commandments, the mezuzah, that's a literal Hebrew word for doorpost, is mezuzah. So we're going to talk about that now. Is this the first time we heard about the door? Think about that.
It's crazy you're going to talk about that because that's in the Torah portion this coming week.
Okay, well, I mean, that helps you connect the dots, as it will. All right, let me go through here then. I'll get to 23 and then I'll stop. So I'll just try to read kind of fast. You pay attention to what I'm saying as far as from a contract point of view. Speak you unto the congregation of Israel, saying, in the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house. And if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next unto his house take it according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his eating shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats, and you shall keep it up until the 14th day of the 7th month of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. And thou shalt take of the blood and strike it on the two doorposts of the houses, wherein they shall eat it. It's the first time we see the talking about the door. And they shall eat the flesh in the night, roasted with fire, and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Eat not of it raw, nor sodden at all with water, but roast with fire. his head with his legs, and with the pertinence thereof. And you shall let nothing of it remain unto the morning, and that which remaineth of it until morning you shall burn with fire. Okay, so as far as in terms and conditions go, there's a whole bunch here. I mean, this is pretty detailed, right?
And there's blood.
That's the thing I want to focus on, but you could probably list 20 things there. There are terms and conditions. That's part of a contract. Speak unto the congregation of Israel. Is that a party to the contract? That's a party to the contract.
You know, what's interesting is, what you're bringing up is very interesting, because when you're seeing these contracts or these covenants, there's always a sign, something that's the memorial part of it. With Abraham, it was the circumcision, right?
Which involved blood, right?
Yes. And so here we have this redemption that's taken place, and it's being remembered year after year after year. It's the remembrance of this redemption process that took place. Just like when we entered into a contract with the state about driving, we carry a memorial with us, don't we?
Right.
A driver's license.
That gives you authority for driving the capacity
so
of the state.
That driver's license is a memorial, a sign that we carry with us, a remembrance of the covenant that we entered into. So yes, I think it's great to bring this up, that there's covenants here and there's remembrances, signs that follow them.
So Yahweh is obviously one party. He's the one that's telling them to do this. The congregation of Israel is another party. Is there another party? What about the people that follow after Israel? This is Israel going forward, right? We are to remember this until these guys die off, and then when we don't remember anymore? No, the parties go through time. As each generation comes online, they have to do the same thing. So they're also a party to the contract. There's a meeting of the minds because they do it.
Yeah.
So there's people that left Israel and entered into Mount Sinai.
Just like he said, I'm not just speaking with you here today, but with the people down the road of future generations.
Right. So let me continue on. Mike has a question.
Yeah. Go ahead. Oh, we were just wondering, this is the actual historical event, right?
Right.
And that's a one-time thing, but now what we do is we memorialize it every year?
Right. Like in Leviticus 23, that's part of the memorializing it. And I was kind of...
So as far as like putting blood on your doorpost and lintel, because somebody asked me if I put blood on my doorpost. I said, no. I didn't slay a lamb either, so I don't know. I mean, that's not something we still do in that respect, right? We just memorialize it.
The memorial is...
Where do you get that we don't do that now? I mean, I know we don't. I mean, at least I don't, and I don't know anyone that does, but where do we get the authority not to do that?
Any thoughts on that? I would make a distinction, but there is a difference. There is a change between the events that happened and the laws that commanded. And I kind of munged those two things together. I probably shouldn't have. But the point is, you can't have the memorial of the Passover, the original Passover, without the original Passover happening. So there's a connection there.
As far as the memorial goes and the symbolic things that I do is I take wine and do it over the doorposts with a branch.
There you go. But in this particular case, they did it for a reason. A very specific life and death reason, right? We'll get to that. And verse 11 I am at, Exodus 12:11. And thus shall you eat it with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It's Yahweh's Passover. Biblical fast food. And is it the Jews' Passover? It's Yahweh's Passover. the Jews do it, but I'm just saying it's Yahweh's feast. It's his commandment. For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt will I execute judgment. I am Yahweh, and the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses wherein you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you, when I smite the land of Egypt. And this day shall you be unto you for a memorial. Right? Let's use that word. Look it up real quick, just for fun. Lezikaron, like zakar, I think is the root word. But it tells you here that it's going to be a memorial as well. In the actual telling of it, he also tells you that it's to memorialize this. Anyway, you shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. You shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. So for forever to work, you have to be in covenant, and this has to pass from one generation down to the next. What question?
Oh, why we're not slaughtering the animal.
Okay.
So in Deuteronomy 16:5 it says, "You're not allowed to sacrifice the Passover in any of your towns, which the Lord God is giving you, but at the place where the Lord God chooses to place his name." Here's your answer.
Ollie has a question. Thank you.
Passover is one event. It occurred one time. Each time following that, we are recalling that particular event. That is why Yeshua tells us, now when you do this in remembrance of me. So we're doing it to recall, or like you said, memorialize a single event that occurred.
Right. Well, I thought I had to go all the way down to 23. He kind of tells it again, I guess, in 23. Well, let me just keep reading. I could probably make my case right here, but. Let me just stop right here. This is good enough. So, does he tell you here you have to put the blood on the doorpost? The blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you. And the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. So let's have fun. First of all, it's on the door. The door, I would argue, the reason that's on the door is it tells you the law form that this building operates under. It's full disclosure. There, they have a law form, the public, the laws that apply to the public. But on this side, this is the law form we operate under. Do you have a comment, Mark?
I was just going to, just a side note was, so when Yeshua had the meal with the disciples, that next morning is when he's put on the cross, right? So that would be, he's like the Passover lamb. Well, that evening when they're having the meal, sun has set, so the 14th day has already begun after sunset. So it's technically Pesach. Pesach's the 14th, unleavened bread begins the 15th. So just a point to note that meal he's having with the apostles, even though it's the evening before, it's already technically the next day of the 14th because the sun has already set.
Right. Well, I was focusing on the angel of death. That's what I wanted to focus on. So let's imagine we're back there in Egypt. We're at this event, and someone knocks on the door. I'm for the angel of death. I'm here to take your firstborn. You know, your firstborn of your son and the firstborn of all your cattle, all your animals. Well, I would ask the question, where's your warrant? The Latin is quo warranto. Where's your warrant? Where's your authority to do that? I told you I was going to go ahead and do all this to all the lands of Egypt. Oh, well, you don't understand, see? I took out a angel of death policy program from Yahweh, and I followed all the instructions to prevent this from happening, and I have the sign that this is the law form that I have, and it's on the doorpost. Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'll pass over and go to the neighbor. I made a contract with Yahweh if I followed those rules. The angel of death who wants to kill, at least not if it's me, if I'm the firstborn, who wants to kill me, can't do that by contract.
You know, John, I don't believe it was an angel of death. I think it was God himself, because
that makes it even more powerful.
It said, the blood shall be a sign for you upon the houses where you are. When I shall see the blood, and I shall pass over you, there shall not be a plague of destruction upon you when I strike in the land of Egypt. It's
right.
Nothing about an angel of death. It was the Lord.
That's fair. No, I've read that before, and that's true. But that makes my point even more powerful. You can't do that, God. How many times people say that? He did it to those people who weren't in contract with him. God can't do whatever he wants if he has a legal binding contract with you that says he can't do that. That's pretty powerful.
Well, it's interesting that I can't remember right off the top of my head, but it talks about reminding God of his promises and these contracts, reminding him.
Right. That's really powerful when Moses does that.
Remember your word. Remember what you said. And so that's kind of what you're saying here is, you know, hey, God, Father, you know, I've entered in this agreement with you, and this is what you promised.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not saying these things to be audacious or something like that. I'm just pointing out what it is. And so, to take that thought forward, if that contract to you is super important, like it'll talk about later on, where it tells you the blessings that come from that, then you better be on your game when you're contracting that away. When someone is making you an offer such that that contract goes away. Was it a good thing that Yahweh was the king of Israel? Yes. They made a big mistake when they said, we don't want Yahweh as our king anymore in 1 Samuel chapter 8, for example. So I'm just pointing that out, and it's interesting how let's go back to the concept of the door again. Where do you first hear about the door in scriptures? Or what I think of anyway. Where's a powerful verse in scriptures before this that talks about the door? Let's go to Genesis 4. Sin is at your door. Where's that? 7, isn't it? I think I remember that. There it is. So this is the story of Cain and Abel, and why is his countenance low? And Cain's offer was not accepted by Yahweh. And Yahweh, in verse 6 it says, and Yahweh says unto Cain, why art thou wroth? And why is thy countenance fallen? Why has thy countenance fallen? Verse 7. If thou doest well, and shalt thou not be accepted? If thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door.
Are you,
And unto thee shall be his desires, and thou shalt rule over him. Go ahead.
are you taking this in the direction of like the scripture that says, if you have something to settle with your brother, don't do it indoor, go outside of the door and do it? Kind of like they settled all of their agreements and everything at the gate into the city, so the door is the gate into the house. So all contracts and all judgments are settled at the gates and the doors.
Right. That's another example. You're right. That's another example of where the doors, these entrance and exit places occur. I can think of another example. You know, who will be called great in the kingdom of heaven? Well, the kingdom of heaven is defined by the perimeters that are around it and the gates to get into it. You can't get past those gates if you don't in proper law form. If you're not in compliance with the law of Jerusalem. But what I was getting at here was, isn't one way to describe the law, the Torah, as a collection of sins? I mean, that's not the most positive way of looking at it, but how would you know the way to overcome sins? The essence of sin is missing the mark. And the Torah describes you what the mark is, and if you miss it, then you need to fix that. You need to do something about that. So, it has to list what the sins are so you know what you're doing wrong. And again, it's the same thing that we do there. We have the 10 Commandments. There's a list of things that we will do and that we won't do. So I'm just pointing out that it's at the door. And you know, this sin, if you let it in, it's like the angel of death or Yahweh himself who will come in and punish you. So you need to identify your contract. I guess that's what I'm coming down to. You need to identify your sacred contract with Yahweh. You need to know what they are, and you need to understand the jurisdictions that you operate in. Any other thoughts on that? Anyway, when Mark was... Go ahead, Margaret.
Yeah, I think a lot of times what happens is people don't understand that the Torah is a collection of laws, wherein you have the ceremonial and sacrificial laws, and you have the dietary laws, and you have the commercial laws, and you have the criminal laws, you have the civil laws. And the grace people, most of Christianity, they say you can't keep that. You can't do that. Well, sure you can. Just like in a law-abiding country, you keep the laws. You don't run red lights.
Right.
You do things according to the laws that are written in the books, the Arizona Revised Statutes, or the criminal code, the civil code, the Uniform Commercial Code, whatever you have.
And if you mess those up, then you're supposed to be a way to make the
there's consequences. Yeah, there's going to be consequences. And what people say is that, oh, no, you can't keep them. And if you break one, then you're already guilty of breaking all of them. And so we can't do them. We're not going to do them. That doesn't make sense if you really stop to think about it. You know, you're going to have a really lawless community. And so I think what happens is that the grace part of it is just extended beyond what it's supposed to be. Grace is supposed to be it's mercy, it's kindness that Yahweh extends to us because Yeshua died in our place for breaking whatever it is that we break unwillingly, or not unwillingly, but unintentionally. And I think that's what gets a lot of people, is that they say we cannot keep all the laws. There's no way that we can do it.
Well, a couple things I would add to that, and they imply that that's the way it was in the Torah. That's the way it was when the people left the Exodus, that these laws were so rigid and so unattainable that it's almost like God was just waiting for them to mess up because he knew they would. Well, I don't read that story. I see people coming out of Egypt, and that was easy to do. And when they rebelled, it was nonsensical, the rebellion. It was absurd. It wasn't like these laws are too hard. It's that they just didn't believe that to acquire their inheritance, they had to go take the land. They didn't want that. They didn't want it. They didn't want to make that effort. They wanted just to have it given to them. It wasn't. I mean, the things that got them killed, and there were numerous times where groups of them were killed by God. It was just flat out rebellion and anarchy. And I think the lesson to learn from that is, man, when you get used to being a slave and you stay in that mindset for so long, it's hard to be able to live in liberty and freedom and to do the things that you ought to be doing that isn't hard to do. So that makes sense. What else? I can go through my document here real quick. Talk about courts a lot because that's where decisions are made. And an important thing to understand about courts is this is something I learned fairly recently, a few years ago. Courts, they're not interested in your opinion. They're interested in your claims that you make. And the claims are ultimately based on the contracts that you say you have or didn't have with the other party that you have a conflict with. And so you need to state a claim. If you don't state a claim, you're going to lose in that court every time. Did you have a question, Paulie?
No, go ahead.
Well, I'm trying to put the highlights here. So that to me is very, when you have a conflict with people, I'm not really interested in your opinions or what you feel about this or that. How are you an injured party? How are you damaged? What is your claim? What is it that you want the court to do to make something right? We're not here to exercise your theories of law or anything. It's about claims. Courts are claims-based. That's what they're looking for. It's important to make sure you have a contract. It's important that you understand that contract and that there's not assumptions that the other party is making against you. So, I don't know, it's kind of hard. I've been studying that on another subject, and that was something that really, really struck me.
I have two. One's a question for you, but first, a comment on what you were talking about prior, about the house of Israel was instructed, the whole house of Israel, I have given you this land, now go in and possess it. Having just come from the land of Judea and Samaria, the land given to Ephraim. It's very interesting to see that now, because you did not obey and do what I told you to do, is why we're facing the dilemma of a Palestinian state being set up now here in this region. So I think for us as Ephraim, what we can do is maybe just continue to pray and ask the Father for his divine plan to continue to unfold. And I don't know what that looks like for us, but I know that, there's different opinions. Jews, the different opinion is that those coming into the land will all be Judah, that everybody else is just vanished and too far gone. All those returning will all be Judah. And there are those that also know, no, the Father has preserved them for a time, and in his time, he will bring them back to reclaim what he gave them, and at that time, they will possess what was given to them.
So there's a good example of claims. We're not identifying as Jews. We're not identifying as the house of Judah. We identify as Joseph, Ephraim, house of Israel. So it's one thing to just say, well, it's my opinion this, it's my opinion that. How would you articulate that into a claim? So if there was some court that was trying to prevent you, if you felt compelled, I need to go back to Israel. I need to take the Gaza Strip. I need to have an influence on that somehow. Maybe that's what you are compelled to do. What is your claim going to be to make that happen, to make it so that you're a citizen, that they'll recognize your citizenship? If you come up with the typical antinomian Christian covenant doesn't mean anything point of view, I don't know, that's a pretty lame claim. Why do you think you belong here? So, in the courts that will actually make those decisions, can you make a claim? My claim is I'm a redeemed Ephraimite. The purpose of Yeshua was to overcome the thing that prevented me from being a citizenship. We talked about in some of these verses, like in Ephesians. That's my claim. In the past, Jews would have listened to, if you would have made a claim from your typical Christian, they would dismiss it out of hand because you don't recognize the law form that Israel is supposed to operate under. You are by definition lawless. And you want us to let you in? What? That's a pretty weak claim.
So maybe we need to make statements frequently of Isaiah 56.
That was a chapter I was thinking about going into too, but that's excellent. Let's go there.
Let not the foreigner who has joined himself say, the Lord will surely separate me from his people, nor let the eunuch say, behold, I'm a dry tree. For thus says the Lord, to the eunuchs who keep my Sabbaths and choose what pleases me and hold fast to my covenant, to them I will give my house and within my walls a memorial and a name better than that of sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name which will not be cut off. Also to the foreigners who join themselves to the Lord, to minister to him and to love the name of the Lord, to be his servants, everyone who keeps from profaning the Shabbat and holds fast to my covenant. Even those I will bring to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer, and their offerings and their sacrifices will be acceptable on my altar. So the claim is, Father, I am keeping your Shabbat, and I'm holding fast to your covenant.
I have evidence
Yes.
that I kept your Shabbat.
Yeah.
I could get a witness and testimony, an affidavit, that this person for the last 2 decades has been keeping your Sabbath, has been keeping the high Sabbath, has been following the dietary laws, who doesn't say I'm a Gentile, because it says here, I'm giving you a new name. Oh, that's an interesting thought concept right there. But he says, let's read it again. If you were a stranger and that you joined yourself to Yahweh, do not say, I'm a eunuch, I'm a dry tree.
That's
Now,
right.
it's interesting what that eunuch means, what the concept there is.
I think it's people who are cut off.
Exactly. It's a eunuch in a physical sense means he has no way of having procreating, of having a
And
generation.
he's had something cut off. I think it's metaphorically talking about a people that have been
In
cut.
God's eye,
Yeah.
yeah,
Ralphie was in the in-depth study on Shabbat was talking about the eunuch.
right. It was in Matthew 19, and he came
Yeah.
back to this chapter.
Yeah.
So to me, because the house of Israel got the bill of divorce, in God's eye, you're dead to me. I don't care how many children you have. They're dead to me. It's like you didn't have any children. What does it mean to me?
They were a dry tree.
Right. So if you understand that that's talking of, if you can make a claim that reasonably points back to the house of Israel, which is historical, which got the bill of divorce, and you can make a reasonable claim, you're doing these things. It isn't even just what I say. My actions speak it out, or walk it out. Your actions speak louder than your words. So I'm doing these things.
Yeah.
What exactly is the complaint for not allowing me to enter into the land of Israel?
Yeah.
Right?
Let the heavens declare and the earth rejoice.
Oh, when you were reading this verse in Isaiah here, well, it makes me think that basically we're all foreigners who have joined ourselves to Yahweh to serve Him. And the promise is that He says He's going to bring us into the land. So I think as long as we continue, doing what we're supposed to be doing and holding on to His covenant, that He's going to fulfill His promise to us. And
Right. So
That's right.
the question becomes, somebody was asking me about this after the presentation last Shabbat. Are we supposed to leave? When do we leave? What is this about? Am I supposed to move right now? What? And I'm like, well, you'll know when you know. But you need to be prepared for it in your mind that you can go when you're told to go, you can go. You've got that thought out in your brain. You don't have to struggle over that. You don't have to struggle over the... Right, but you'll know what you go. My advice to them would be... right, but don't let somebody else talk you out of going when you really think you should be going. That would be my advice. Does that make sense? Because if someone and this is what's the problem with the Noahide law form. They're talking you out of the covenant with Yahweh.
yeah, Marvin just made a comment to me that made me think of back in my military days. He said, what'd you say, not your pay grade? Above your pay grade. But when I was in the
What was that
service,
again?
above your pay grade. It's
Above your pay grade.
When I was in the service, they have this kind of idea that need to know. Do you have a need to know?
Right.
And basically it just means just do your job, just do what you're supposed to do. If it doesn't concern you, you don't, if there's no need for you to know, don't question it.
But you need to be prepared at any time.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean,
that was
definitely.
my advice.
But that's kind of my point, is that the best thing we can be doing is just continue to do what we're doing and not worry about God's plan or His agenda. Because, I believe He's going to do His thing in His time.
That's right.
So,
Another thing you could do, a simple thing. Go get your passport done. Who needs to do that?
Yeah.
I raised my hand, you missed it. That's a simple thing to do. How about building relationships with people in Judea? When it comes to a question whether or not you can be a citizen or not, what if you had a whole bunch of Jews on your side that would write affidavits on your behalf and identify you, that you make a powerful claim as a redeemed Ephraimite? And then you're not here to tell them that the Torah has been done away with, far from it. I want to run at the Torah, not away from it. I've been doing that for 2 decades. Right? If you want a detailed document on that, I wrote one. Let's see here. Let's go back to... Go back here. Go to the teachings. Go to house. Here. Brit Shalom for Judah and Ephraim. You want to see what my thoughts are on that? Looking at it from a legal point of view. number 790 is the an article number to go look it up. You can just follow that link. It'll take you there. And it's the idea behind it is, how would you go about making a covenant with Judah if you're from Ephraim, if you're from the house of Israel? How would you make your case? Basically, it's like that. The whole idea started off with when Yeshua says, regarding your korban offering, if your brother has aught with you, well, my brother's Judah. I know what that's about. You need to go to him and resolve the issue. There's my approach. That's how I'm doing it. Here's my document. Here's what's going to take me there. Are you going to prevent me, someone who believes the Torah, who's doing the Torah, is trying to bring his korban offering to Yahweh? You're going to prevent me from doing that? Is that going to go well? Yeah, I mean, are you sure you want to do that? Why would you want to do that? So if you're interested in that, go check that article out. There's another point I wanted to bring up. I just kind of threw my... Here's another subject to think about. How much time do we got left? 10 minutes? I have this understanding that when you create these contracts, you create a law form, like the Torah law form. When you enter into it, it becomes formalized. It becomes a thing. It defines the jurisdictions. It does a lot of things. We were talking about in last week's Parsha. I remember Perry Beth talking about reading it in Deuteronomy verses that we read. It says, don't change any of my statutes, right? I won't add to or take away. Talks about that in Revelations as well. So, is there a valid law form if you've taken away or added to? Does that law form become valid anymore? What I'm getting to is a lot of people, with the Founding Fathers, I look to the Founding Fathers for a lot of things, but I think there's some things they just didn't get right, respectfully. And that is this concept of natural law. In fact, if you do a history on that, Daniel Botkins, everybody heard of Daniel Botkins? He's got a great article on talking about Thomas Aquinas, I call him the darling of Catholicism, and he explains or tries to, he's an apologetic for why they're not doing all the laws of the Torah. And in fact, he's explaining why he's an antinomian. Why doesn't he fully embrace the Torah? And he comes in with this natural law argument. Well, that's just, first of all, why do I need to substitute rights from natural law? Isn't the Torah sufficient? Can't I find all my authority within that confine, within those parameters? And if you think about it, if there's a Torah law form, if there's a natural law form, and I have rights that come from that, and someone violates those rights, who do I take to court to adjudicate the matter? I've got a claim. If natural law is about nature, the trees, the rocks, the stars, the heavens, do I bring them? Do I bring them into court and sue them for breach of contract? It's nonsense. It sounds nice, but it's nonsense. Torah law, that's your body that you need to work from. You can talk about other things too. Sharia law. Is there a law form there? Did they go and create a contract? Where did they say, like Israel did at Mount Sinai, I will do? I will do what you say, Yahweh. I don't see that. I haven't studied it. I'm not an expert at it. I'm not trying to be controversial, but is it really a law form? Is there law there? If you want to walk away from Sharia law, are they okay with that? Or do they get angry about that in a really nasty way? Is that a meeting of the minds?
It may be a law form, but in their own mind and not with the creator of the heavens and the earth.
Right. It's who did you contract with? So there's another one too that I like to talk about. Well, those are the big ones, natural law. And I'm being fair to everybody. I'm not just picking on them. I'm picking on the founding fathers who come up with this stuff that they borrowed from Thomas Aquinas. So anyway, I think we'll quit early on that. Oh, it's just time, isn't it? Any other questions? Or I kind of was hustled today to get my my presentation together, so if there's no other questions. I would encourage you to go read that. I got a lot of help from Jerry on that. He helped me editorial or play the role of the journalist.
I have a question just for your opinion. It was on Exodus 12, verse 26, and it has to do with a question that was asked earlier. Someone was asked, well, are you putting blood on your doorpost? Are you sacrificing a lamb? And it says, and when your children ask you, what does this ceremony mean to you? Then tell them, it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord, who passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt and spared our homes when he struck down the Egyptians. So I don't know what your version means, and I'd have to look it up a little further, but what do you think what is your opinion on you're going to tell your children, it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord?
I'm sorry, what verse are you on? Or where was the verse?
27.
Of 12, chapter 12?
I think the word sacrifice here is zabah, and it can mean sacrifice or it can mean offering.
I'm on the wrong place. Hold on. That ye shall say, it is the sacrifice of Yahweh's Passover, who passed over the house of the children of Israel in Egypt when he smote the Egyptians and delivered our houses, and the people bowed the head and worshipped. So your question is about the sacrifice? No, I was trying to. Zabakah, yeah. Zavak, yeah. It's a bet with a.
And I think it can mean both sacrifice, but it can also mean offering. Since, like this particular first time in Egypt, this wasn't done, these people didn't slay their lambs on an altar. So this wasn't a sacrificial offering where it was burned and consumed, on an altar. These lambs were roasted on a spit. And so when people slaughtered their lamb at the temple, took their lamb back to their home, they cooked it at their house. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So it's not like this is a sacrifice that's being burned on an altar. So that's why I'm thinking this word that can also mean sacrifice can also mean offering. And I think it's more, we need to look at it more as an offering, the Passover offering.
Well, yeah, I guess I personally don't have a problem with sacrifices being offerings. I mean, when you...
Well, they are.
When is the sacrifice not an offering? When is it... You can't go get roadkill and say, oh, here's my sacrifice, right? There's no value in that. You just happen upon this thing, And there's the point of the sacrifice is it has value to you.
Yeah.
So you're the quid pro quo. As I like that, you have skin in the game, real skin in the game.
My point is that it's an offering that's not
on
done.
the altar.
It's not done on an altar like we would think of a sacrificial system. It's an offering.
Right,
Yeah.
but the sacrificial system still has
An offering.
a concept of value. It brings
Of course.
you have value. It has a value to you
Yeah.
that you're giving up. You're sacrificing.
And what's interesting is Yeshua is the Passover offering, but he obviously didn't die at the altar in the temple. He died outside the gate.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know if is Jerry coming back next week or not? I better know these things. Well, that's a good. Let's talk about that real quick. I think I'm supposed to do it next week. 17th. Today's the 2nd. The 3rd. He won't be here for the 10th. That's the important part. Is there anything in particular do you want to go start the book of Judges, or is there anything that I sent out a text that we had at the men's club? We had a thing on the upper room, which was a fascinating subject. We could probably just watch the video of that. It's because it's talking about the Shavuot coming up. Okay. That's the dry bones? No. Okay. That was the original document I was going to start up on, all right, let's do that. Let's read ahead on the dry bones. Ezekiel 37. Right. Then he says, breathe into them. It's like a rebirth, like in Genesis, the original birth. All right, let's do that. Unless I have a crazy idea where I can't do that, but we'll start there. All right, let's end in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for this evening together with you to study your word and to try to get to some deep understanding of what you would have us do so we can go and be better servants for you and do the requirements that you would have for us, and so that when we do the things that we're required to do, you will be pleased with them, and they will be a blessing to us, but to all the nations as well. We pray that the eyes and the ears of Brother Judah will be opened, so that they can be receptive to what we're talking about, and that we're honoring your covenants, we're honoring your Torah. Not what most of Christianity has done for many, many years. So, this is my prayer, Heavenly Father. I pray these things in the power, name, and authority of your Son, Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen.